Hey everyone, remember my recent live debate with idiot anti-vaxxers Steve Kirsch and Pierre Kory? It was a lot of fun humiliating them right to their faces, but we didn't have enough time to really dig into their histories of fraudulence. In my video about the debate, I promised that each of them would get their own in-depth video, and this is the first of those. So let's get started by crapping all over Steve Kirsch. Imagine this, if you will. You're an ultra-wealthy tech dude who loves the smell of their own farts and thinks success in Silicon Valley makes you smarter than every immunologist, epidemiologist, biostatistician, and medical researcher on the planet. That's Steve Kirsch. Steve isn't a doctor or scientist or anything like that. He doesn't even hold high school level competency in any area of science. He's an entrepreneur best known for being one of two people who independently invented the optical mouse in the 1980s. He amassed a fortune of several $100 million after founding several tech companies, including InfoSeek, a search engine in the early days of the internet. Fast forward a bit. Early in the COVID-19 pandemic, Steve positioned himself as a philanthropist, funding research efforts into early treatment of COVID through the COVID-19 Early Treatment Fund, or CETF. Sounds like it could be pretty good, right? But remember, Steve knows jack shit about medicine. So in ideologically guided fashion, he fixated on repurposed drugs like fluvoxamine, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin without any firm clinical basis. When the research didn't pan out, since those drugs objectively do nothing to treat or prevent COVID, what did Steve do? Did he admit they were dead ends and pivot to something useful? Of course not. He began blaming the researchers, claiming poor study design and statistical errors. Researchers at Washington University in St. Louis and University of Minnesota, who had been recipients of grant money from CETF to study early COVID treatments, ended up experiencing prolonged harassment from random brainwashed anti-vaxxers as a result of Steve's persistent accusations and hostile tone on social media. A researcher at the University of Minnesota who was awarded a CETF grant to study hydroxychloroquine use for COVID reported receiving hateful emails, including ones calling him a Nazi for daring to include controls in his study design. Are you a re-embodied Nazi, Joseph Mengele? What are you thinking? Eliminate your plan to abuse people as needless controls. You have a duty of care. Quite the armchair expert on pharmacology and clinical trials, huh? But Steve can't be fazed by the integrity of the scientists he's funding or their harassment by his lunatic followers. Heavens no. Despite the fact that all 12 members of the CETF advisory board resigned after this debacle, specifically citing Steve's dangerous claims and erratic behavior as their reason for quitting, Steve knew in his marrow that he was on the right track. There was a concerted effort by the scientific and medical communities to suppress cheap, effective drugs to treat COVID. Why accept that the evidence just didn't pan out in his favor when he can surround himself with a bullshit narrative and play the heroic knight fighting the system? This is when Steve decided to amp up his conspiratorial rhetoric to 11. Believing that his own amateur analyses revealed hidden dangers, he became convinced that public health agencies and pharmaceutical companies were suppressing the truth about vaccines, and he began using his wealth and online presence to promote alarming and totally unsubstantiated claims. There is a quote from the early 2000s that highlights the extent of Steve's narcissism. He told a reporter, "There are two ways I've discovered that I may be able to save the world. One is to reduce the threat of nuclear war. Another is to identify an asteroid that is going to hit the planet." Yes, Steve, single-handedly save us from nuclear bombs and asteroids like you're fucking Superman. While Steve is clearly totally delusional, it does make him an interesting character, somewhat in contrast with Pierre Kory. Pierre is a grifter to the core. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows he's lying, and he does it for money. But Steve is rich. He doesn't need money, which leads one to conclude that he might actually be well-intentioned. He seems to have a hero complex that has enveloped his identity to such a profound degree that he can't even consider the possibility that he's spreading lies, and that those lies could cause real-world harm, which holy hell they definitely have. Steve has a long history of throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks, which might work well in the tech world, but for public health and communication, it just leads to false narratives being picked up and spread around the internet, especially in the anti-vax community. So what is Steve's misinformation all about? Here are the common themes that can be identified in his misinformation. 1. Misuse of the VAERS database. He will constantly cite raw, unverified reports as though they must be true and that they are evidence of causation. 2. Cherry-picking data. He will deliberately select specific datasets or timeframes that support a desired narrative while ignoring broader evidence. 3. Reliance on anecdotal evidence. He is constantly relaying individual stories or isolated incidents to generalize about vaccine safety, which would be bad science even if the stories were true, which they often are not. And 4. Ignoring confounding factors. He will overlook variables like age, underlying health conditions, or pre-existing risks that can influence outcomes. Now let's go through some specific examples to highlight how he implements these themes to misinform the public about vaccine safety. In September 2021, about a year and a half into the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. had about half of the population vaccinated, and the decision to administer an additional booster was being discussed by health professionals. On September 17th, the FDA held an 8-hour advisory meeting discussing the use of Pfizer COVID-19 booster doses. The meeting included a panel of 15 outside experts to advise the FDA on the matter, the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. But Steve believed with all his heart and in his supreme ignorance bordering on science illiteracy that he knew something these experts didn't. So Steve signed up to make a comment during the open public hearing session. That's right, he was ready to wow the experts with his super impressive technical statisticular analyses and save the day. And boy is he dedicated. Steve suffered through 4 whole hours on Zoom, listening to Paige shills talk about boring fake data and something about considering confounders when analyzing population data. I mean, who cares about all that? Then finally it was Steve's time to shine. He had his script down cold, his slides were on point, his super awesome data would speak for itself. With Steve ready to drop the big truth bomb, they called his name, he sat up in front of his mic, and with those medical experts in the FDA listening, he said this.
I'm going to focus my remarks today on the elephant in the room that nobody likes to talk about, that the vaccines kill more people than they save. Today, we focus almost exclusively on COVID death saves and vaccine efficacy because we were led to believe that the vaccines are perfectly safe. But this is simply not true. For example, there were 4 times as many heart attacks in the treatment group in the Pfizer 6-month trial report. That wasn't bad luck. VAERS shows heart attacks happen 71 times more often following these vaccines compared to any other vaccine. In all, 20 people died who got the drug, 14 died who got the placebo. Few people notice that. If the net all-cause mortality from the vaccines is negative, vaccines, boosters, and mandates are all nonsensical. This is the case today.
Way to go, Stevie. You really showed them, and by that I mean completely humiliated yourself. There is so much wrong with this on so many levels. Let's dissect this in detail so we can begin to fathom the irritation the experts on this call must have felt during Steve's little presentation. Let's begin with the elephant in the room, that vaccines kill more people than they save. No, they definitely do not. They absolutely save lives. We know this because once people started getting COVID vaccines, the overwhelming majority of people who died of COVID were unvaccinated. In 2021, prior to the emergence of new variants, it was something around 98% in fact. Furthermore, no one says vaccines are 100% perfectly safe. Nothing in the entire world is 100% perfectly safe. Not walking down the street, not drinking water, not sleeping, nothing. This is a typical straw man that all anti-vaxxers use, but any educated person is perfectly aware that vaccines do have extremely rare and typically mild side effects in a small proportion of recipients, with the exceptionally rare, more serious adverse event. That's why they go through rigorous 3-phase safety trials, and despite the insistence of some delusional reality-denying anti-vaxxers, all COVID vaccines completed clinical trials before becoming publicly available. Normal people are fine talking about the elephant in the room. It's just that when you refer to a mouse or even your own shadow as an elephant, people will begin to question your credibility. But let's talk about the heart of this elephant. What was it that he said about heart attacks? There are 4 times as many heart attacks in the treatment group in the Pfizer 6-month trial report. Wow, sounds scary, but let's not be sheep like anti-vaxxers and simply take him at his word. Let's take a look at the Pfizer data for ourselves, just to check, on the off chance Steve is lying or stupid. Okay, looking at the supplementary materials, specifically table S4. Here we can see the causes of death for participants from dose 1 to unblinding, meaning the time at the end of the trial when previously hidden identifying information is revealed to the researchers for analysis. Steve said heart attacks were 4 times more likely for those who received the vaccine versus placebo. Where did he get that exactly? Heart attacks are listed under myocardial infarction, since that is the clinical term for heart attack. It looks like the vaccine group had 0 and the placebo had 2. Well, that's funny. Where did he get the number 4? Oh wait, I know. Steve was looking at the data for cardiac arrest, which is a totally different thing. So Steve doesn't know what either of these terms mean. In fact, on his Substack, he demonstrates quite clearly that he doesn't know what these terms mean. There were 4 times as many cardiac arrests in the vaccine group versus the placebo group. Again, this does not mean heart attacks. Since Steve seems to be a little confused, let's help him out and teach him some physiology. Heart attacks, or myocardial infarction, are very different from cardiac arrest. A heart attack occurs when blood flow to a portion of the muscle tissue in the heart is blocked, typically by a clot in a coronary artery, causing heart tissue damage due to lack of oxygen, which is normally supplied by the bloodstream. Symptoms include chest pain, shortness of breath, and sweating, and it does not necessarily stop the heart. Cardiac arrest, conversely, is a sudden cessation of the heart's pumping function due to an electrical malfunction, such as ventricular fibrillation, leading to immediate loss of circulation and consciousness, often requiring CPR or defibrillation to restore rhythm. While the heart attack can trigger cardiac arrest, they are entirely distinct. One is a plumbing issue, the other is an electrical failure. Steve demonstrates that he doesn't understand basic medical terminology, and he doesn't bother to check with anyone who does in order to make sure he's not embarrassing himself. If you, the viewer at home, didn't know the difference between these two terms, don't feel bad about it. Every day is a chance to learn something new, and you're not the asshole who logged into an FDA hearing to try and lecture medical experts on vaccine safety data by making a blunder that would be the humiliation of the semester for any first-year medical student. Now that we've clarified this basic comprehension issue, let's get back to the numbers in the Pfizer trial. For heart attack, we already clarified that 0 died from the vaccine group and 2 died from the placebo group. Wow, so vaccines prevent heart attacks. Or maybe the saline in the placebo causes heart attacks? What a bombshell. Just kidding, people with intellectual integrity don't pull conclusions out of their assholes like that. Let's be charitable and look at the data Steve was referencing, even though he got the term wrong, since cardiac arrest is also bad. Okay, so we have 4 deaths from cardiac arrest in the vaccine group. Out of how many exactly? That's out of 21,926 participants receiving the vaccine. Out of 21,926 people, 4 of them died of cardiac arrest during a trial which followed participants over a 6-month period. The placebo group had 1 death from cardiac arrest out of 21,921. It is absolutely ridiculous to think that these numbers are statistically significant given the enormous size of each group. This isn't some freak occurrence like having a piano fall on your head while walking down the street. People die of cardiac arrest all the time. You can plug these numbers into a 2x2 contingency table, run a chi-square test, and see that these numbers do not reach statistical significance with a p-value of around 0.18. These numbers are perfectly within the realm of expectation by chance. That's not even considering the fact that the vaccine group had more heart-related comorbidities, which are recorded at the start of the trial, as shown in Table S2. He makes it sound super scary by saying 4 times more heart attacks, but beyond the fact that they're not heart attacks, he doesn't tell us that the number of cases is 4, and that's out of about 22,000 people. Wrap your head around this crap. How many minutes did we just spend debunking this one fucking sentence out of Steve's dumb mouth? This is Brandolini's law in action. He got definitions wrong. He fumbled data. He misrepresented statistical significance. All of this has to be explained. One sentence. Think about the volume of debunking that would be required to get through everything he's ever said on the internet. We're not going to get anywhere near that in this video, but hopefully a few examples will suffice. With that sentiment in mind, let's move on to his misrepresentation of VAERS data. First, we need to truly understand what VAERS is, as well as what its purpose is and what its limitations are. The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System is a U.S. database jointly run by CDC and FDA. It's a highly sensitive early warning system where anyone, doctors, patients, family members, literally anyone, can submit a report about a health problem anytime after vaccination. There is no verification system of any kind. It's literally any human saying anything they want and submitting it. Nobody emails you with follow-up questions. Nobody comes to your house for a checkup. It's just random people typing words and clicking submit. They could be misrepresenting or exaggerating things. They could be flat out lying. And an unbelievable amount of people do those things. But even in cases where the reports are accurate, we still have to remember a VAERS report does not mean the vaccine caused the problem. It could be, and most often is, totally coincidental. It's just a signal for further investigation in the case that a multitude of similar reports are submitted in a particular area or pertaining to a particular vaccine. This clarification is very clearly stated on the VAERS website. No proof that the event was caused by the vaccine is required in order for VAERS to accept the report. So it's very simple to understand that although VAERS can contain real reports that do support causation, way more of the real reports do not indicate causation, and on top of that, there are thousands of reports that are complete bullshit. Just take a look at this. Adverse event description: alien abduction, turning green, super strength, rage attacks. The vaccine turned somebody into the Hulk, you guys. Here's another one. This person had a penis grow out of their forehead. Their doctor says this happens all the time. What else is Big Pharma hiding from us? This person didn't have a penis grow out of their forehead, but their regular penis grew 5 times bigger. Who needs gas station dick pills when they can just get COVID vaccines? How about this one? It just says farts. Oh, the horror. This one blames the vaccine for a man's infidelity, this one says it made the family dog bite them, and it just goes on like this. Look, obviously most of these are jokes, but that's the fucking point. You can submit literally anything. Anybody can enter anything. That includes jokes to show how unreliable this database is, as well as anti-vaxxers who enter more typical information but are just lying, as well as people who want to believe that a vaccine caused some health issue and therefore subconsciously fabricate aspects of timeline and severity. This is not rigorous data. This is not controlled clinical trials. This is the fucking internet in all its concentrated insanity. Anyone who pretends that raw VAERS data is reliable is a moron. So then, what the shit is this database for? Well, when a cluster of related but unusual reports shows up, like rare blood clotting events after the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine, scientists don't just take the reports at face value. They cross-reference them with other systems like the Vaccine Safety Data Link, or VSD, which tracks millions of patients across integrated health systems in real time. They also use the Clinical Immunization Safety Assessment, or CISA, network to dig into medical records and clinical details. By triangulating across all these systems and performing a rigorous follow-up of case reports, investigators can separate coincidence and fabrication from true causality. That's how regulators were able to confirm a very rare link between the J&J/Janssen vaccine and thrombocytopenia syndrome, or TTS, a condition marked by abnormal blood clotting. Signals appeared in VAERS with reports citing a specific condition within a tight proximity of receiving a dose, and this was corroborated with the VSD, individual case reviews, and death certificates, which led to its removal from use in the US in 2023. I will repeat for emphasis, extremely sophisticated expert analysis was performed, a reliable link was detected between TTS and a particular vaccine, and the vaccine was swiftly pulled from the market due to safety concerns. This example highlights correct combined use of these post-market surveillance systems, including real-life follow-up, which identified around 60 confirmed cases of TTS associated with the Janssen COVID vaccine after 18.4 million doses were administered. 18.4 million. 10 of these cases tragically led to the death of the patients, and to date, these are the only deaths that have been attributed to any COVID vaccine in the US. It also highlights a case where mRNA vaccines were the safer, more effective option over traditional methods like adenoviral vectors. That's right, the Janssen vaccine was not an mRNA vaccine. Now, if RFK Jr. had been in charge during the COVID pandemic, his decision to not fund mRNA vaccine research would mean that we'd all be stuck taking the Janssen vaccine and a bunch more people would have died. Thanks, Bobby. But what about the rest of the world? Data from other countries confirms that risk of death following any COVID vaccine is extremely rare. A 2022 analysis from an Italian group looked at global reporting of COVID-19 vaccine-related deaths available at the time and found just 55 deaths worldwide possibly linked to COVID-19 vaccines. Possibly. This is compared with over 5 million deaths at the time from COVID-19. Pretty big difference. Independent nationwide studies from countries like Qatar, Finland, and Thailand also find similarly tiny mortality risks, around 0.015 to 2.38 deaths per million doses. Steve, on the other hand, he doesn't give two shits about verification. To him, it doesn't matter whether VAERS report are causal or coincidental, whether penises are actually growing out of foreheads, or if you can die from vaccine-induced farting episodes. He just wants to make himself out to be the hero exposing big bad pharma. Anti-vaxxers love to cite raw numbers of VAERS reports to scare people into thinking a vaccine causes every disease or condition reported. But when they cite VAERS data, they are including thousands of reports that are unverified, coincidental, and contain forehead penises, because anyone, literally fucking anyone, can make a VAERS report and say literally fucking anything. So remember, the kind of activity that led to pulling the Janssen vaccine, all the cross-referencing, all the follow-up, this is what the VAERS database is for. This is why it exists, for professionals to analyze the data properly, parse out real trends from the sea of noise, and make decisions that can potentially save lives. It's not for clueless assholes like Steve Kirsch to throw numbers around blindly and pretend they mean something. They don't. Okay, on to his last claim. In all, 20 people died who got the drug, 14 died who got the placebo. Few people noticed that. If the net all-cause mortality from the vaccines is negative, vaccines, boosters, and mandates are all nonsensical. Steve is misrepresenting all-cause mortality from the Phase 3 trial to scare people. This is classic cherry-picking and statistical malpractice. To be clear, all-cause mortality means the overall death rate from all causes, regardless of any pre-existing medical condition. People often die because of stuff that was already definitely going to kill them. It doesn't mean people who died from a vaccine. In the blinded placebo-controlled phase, the part where we can actually compare groups properly, there were 15 deaths in the vaccine group and 14 in the placebo group. Again, both of these groups were around 22,000 people, so this number is essentially identical. No difference whatsoever, which is exactly what we would expect since the vaccine doesn't kill people. And as expected, the investigators concluded that none of those deaths were related to the vaccine. They were from things like heart disease, cancer, and of course, COVID-19, which hit the placebo group harder because, no shit, they didn't have the vaccine protecting them. Kirsch inflates it to 20 versus 14 by including deaths from the open label period after unblinding when placebo participants could cross over and get the vaccine. In that phase, there were 3 more deaths in the original vaccine group and 2 in the crossover group who then got the vaccine. So, like a disingenuous piece of shit fraud, he's lumping all vaccinated deaths together, 20 total, while conveniently ignoring that there's no longer a true placebo arm for comparison after crossover. It's like comparing apples to, well, nothing. The total deaths post-vaccination and crossover aren't offset by any ongoing placebo because everyone who wanted it got vaccinated. This twists the numbers to suggest harm where there is none. Pretty sneaky, huh? Now let's talk stats, because Steve sure doesn't, even factoring in his sneaky stunts. We are left with incredibly tiny numbers. 29 deaths total in the blinded phase across 44,000 people. The trial wasn't even powered to detect differences in all-cause mortality. That's not the point point of a vaccine trial. It's to show efficacy against the disease and basic safety by tightly monitoring participants within a 6-month period. Post-market monitoring using the databases and methods we went over can catch rarer events, as was the case with the Janssen vaccine. A quick chi-square test on 15 versus 14 gives a p-value of about 0.84, meaning zilch, nada, no significance. Even bumping to 20 versus 14 gives a p-value of about 0.33, so still not significant, it's just random noise. If you flip a coin 29 times and get 15 heads versus 14 tails, you don't scream, "The coin is rigged," but Steve does because it fits his narrative. And here's the real kicker: while he's obsessing over all-cause mortality to claim the vaccine kills more people than it saves, which it objectively doesn't by several orders of magnitude, he ignores the massive protective effect against COVID-19. The trial showed 95% efficacy in preventing symptomatic cases, and real-world data from around the globe post-rollout confirm this. Since then, his FDA appearance clip went viral, with idiots mistakenly claiming on social media that a whistleblowing FDA official said vaccines kill more people than they save, when in reality, it was just Steve Kirsch humiliating himself in front of the FDA and the experts advising them during a public hearing session. In general, Steve has continued to be one of the most vocal spreaders of COVID-19 vaccine misinformation, frequently misusing government safety databases, cherry-picking foreign statistics, and amplifying anecdotes to argue that vaccines are deadly, ineffective, or unnecessary. Almost all of his claims fumble basic scientific terminology or techniques in statistical analysis in a similar manner to the example we just went over. We don't have to go through all of the hundreds of instances of him doing this, but let's go over one even cringier example for good measure. On May 19th, 2022, Steve attended a CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP, to make a comment during the public session. Fucking hell, does this asshole never learn his lesson? He urged the experts in CDC to not approve COVID-19 boosters because why? Take a listen.
I urge you to approve, not to approve the boosters because we now have new direct observational data that shows very clearly that the vaccine is killing more kids than it saves.
Wow, the vaccine is killing more kids than it saves. That's a bold claim, but he has direct observational data? What would that be?
The best way to get the data that you need is to do your own post-marketing survey. Fortunately, there's an easy way for you to do this. Here's what I did. I have hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. I asked my followers, do you know any kids who have died since January 2021? Since January 2020? How many have died from COVID? How many might have died from the vaccine?
Oh, okay. He did a survey. He asked his dumb fuck followers, do you know any kids who might have died from the vaccine? They all concocted some bullshit stories or repeated ones they heard from other idiot anti-vaxxers, and that outweighs actual empirical data because reasons. This fucking moron is presenting a self-reporting survey of his social media followers to vaccine experts and medical professionals as though they aren't all rolling their eyes and wondering who let this lunatic into the meeting. Unsurprisingly, his super rigorous Twitter poll didn't convince any experts, which is crazy because nobody has ever lied on the internet, especially in anonymous surveys, and especially not anti-vaxxers, the lyingest liars on the fucking planet. I know that you don't need any convincing of the fact that Steve's surveys are totally pointless, but let's do a little experiment just for fun. There's a ridiculous myth that COVID vaccines cause turbo cancer. This is a made-up, meaningless term coined by anti-vaxxers on social media who spread fake stories claiming an increase in rapidly developing cancers post-vaccination. In reality, the cancer death rate continues to decline every year in the US, and there was a lag in cancer screenings due to the chaos of the pandemic that affected data immediately post-lockdown. Now, given the hilarity of using the term turbo applied to cancer in a meaningless way, and building off of the hilarity of somebody reporting excessive penis growth from COVID vaccines on the VAERS database, I decided to do a little anonymous survey of my own. I have arbitrarily decided that one of the many dangerous side effects of COVID vaccination is turbo penis. I was alerted to this condition, as I just informed you, from the VAERS database, the most perfect and infallible way to figure out what vaccines do. And anonymous surveys taken by random social media followers are the most reliable and legitimate way to gather data about such conditions, according to Steve. So why should he have all the fun? This survey was posted to my community tab. Did you get get the vaccine? Did you or anyone you know get turbopenis from the vaccine? How soon after the vaccine did they get turbopenis? And how old were they at the time? Well, I am thrilled to share the results with you now. First, I am proud to report that over 10,000 people completed the survey, which means we have a very large data set to work with, so you know it's going to be super reliable. Here's a summary table. The breakdown was around 9,500 vaccinated and almost 1,000 unvaccinated. For the vaccinated group, 2,186 people reported knowing someone, including themselves, who grew an unusual penis after vaccination. That's 23.2%, or more than 1 in 5. Of those, 1,695 grew multiple unusual penises, and 491 grew just one unusual penis. An additional 1,169 in the vaccinated group reported sudden changes in existing penis size, which could be an early sign of turbopenis or a variant effect. Further research may be required to eliminate confounders like sexual arousal and swimming in cold water. In the unvaccinated group, there were only 157 reports of turbopenis, which is 17.2%, but most of these included comments that implied insincerity, which I can just implicitly detect because epidemiological statistics is my third favorite hobby. So, adjusting for sarcasm, the real rate is close to 0%, which means a nearly 100% greater risk of turbopenis from getting the vaccine. And here's the real smoking gun. More than 50% of the turbopenis cases happened within 1 week of COVID vaccination. Many reported that it happened immediately, some said 1 day later, some even said it happened before the vaccine, which can only suggest retroactive prehistoric penis growth due to mRNA quantum entanglement. Also, we have to account for underreporting, just like Steve does with VAERS, in this case due to severe trauma. Most people that have turbopenis can't properly operate a computer to complete the survey because their dick is too big, so we have to artificially inflate the results to, I don't know, let's say 70%. That's right, 70% of people who got the COVID vaccine got turbopenis. The most common age reported by far was 69 for some reason, but all age groups are affected, from newborn to several thousand years old. Well, isn't this a bombshell? Why is the media totally silent about vaccine-induced turbopenis? Why isn't CDC investigating this? We must demand that large amounts of federal funds be allocated for studying turbopenis. After all, my survey clearly demonstrates that COVID vaccines cause turbopenis. Case closed. I'm sure Steve would agree, since the numbers are compelling. According to the Steve Kirsch method, turbopenis is a real condition and COVID vaccines definitely cause it. Or, and this might be a tough pill to swallow, this method is totally useless and Steve is completely full of shit. We can let the viewers decide, right, Stevie? Alright, let's go over one more super creepy incident. Later in 2022, Steve felt compelled to physically stalk and harass the ACIP chair, Dr. Grace Lee. He even repeatedly showed up at her home, where he eventually had the cops called on him for trespassing. And get this, Steve is such a delusional fuckwit that he actually posted this footage on Rumble as though it gives him some kind of street cred instead of illustrating what a psychopath he is.
She's not reachable in her office. She doesn't answer her cell phone. Her assistant doesn't answer her email, and this is critical information. It's the health and safety of people in the United States.
Okay.
And the rest of the world.
What do you work as? What do you do? Why do you?
I'm a journalist.
You're a journalist.
I'm a journalist for Substack.
Substack?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have about close to 1 million followers on Substack.
Okay.
And other social media.
Because we got a call regarding you coming over here multiple times, and it seems like they don't want to talk to you.
Well, now it seems that way because she called the police on me.
Okay. Were you
So she clearly, no, because there was nobody here, right? I would ring the doorbell and nobody would answer. And so I would come back hoping to catch her at home. She's clearly at home now, and what's clear is that she's absolutely avoiding me.
So what was the urgent matter that compelled Steve to continuously harass Dr. Lee? Well, you see, he had secret data covered up by the Israeli Ministry of Health that he claimed proves vaccines are killing people and don't work. And what was this data exactly? They were video snippets from a meeting in Hebrew about an adverse reporting system similar to VAERS in the US that was leaked by an Israeli journalist who has previously spread vaccine misinformation. Again, his slam dunk data are short video clips in another language leaked by an anti-vax journalist about unverified reports from Israel's version of VAERS. When we look at actual data, we see exactly what data from all over the globe corroborates. The COVID vaccines are very safe and effective at reducing severe COVID-19 complications. A study by Barda et al. Identified myocarditis as the most prevalent post-vaccine risk, with an excess risk of 2.7 cases per 100,000 persons. In contrast, COVID-19 illness increased this risk by 11 cases of myocarditis per 100,000. This is what the vast majority of the literature around the world has reported, a slight increased risk of myocarditis in young males after vaccination, while COVID illness confers much higher risk of death and long-term severity. An even larger study in California found as few as 0.8 myocarditis cases per 1 million after the first dose and 5.8 cases per 1 million after a second dose over a 10-day period. The bottom line is that getting the vaccine greatly reduced the risk of death and serious complications as a result of infection, including myocarditis. I repeat, COVID caused way more myocarditis than vaccines did, and with greater severity. Vaccine-induced myocarditis was exceptionally rare, exceptionally mild, and almost always resolved itself without any treatment. If COVID vaccines were a larger cause of heart-related deaths than COVID-19 infection, then why did heart-related deaths spike in 2020 pre-vaccine as the pandemic hit the US, while subsequently dropping in the years following the rollout of COVID vaccines? Why is it that countries with higher vaccination rates had fewer excess deaths? Steve's pantheon of bullshit claims have been widely fact-checked and debunked by epidemiologists, regulators, statisticians, and independent experts. Dr. Jeffrey S. Morris, in particular, has spent a lot of time and effort debunking many of Steve's claims in great detail, so check out his efforts if you want to see a more rigorous debunking of this jerk. Steve's claims continue to circulate, partially because of the sheer volume of feces Steve throws at the wall on a daily basis, and partially because of the alluring narrative he spins, where he presents himself as a rebel whistleblower, exposing a huge cover-up. Idiots love that shit. In reality, as we have elucidated, his arguments reveal fundamental misunderstandings of medical data, statistics, epidemiology, as well as basic biology. Okay, let's wrap things up with a little lightning round. A handful of Stevie's claims followed by concise rebuttals that you can use to dunk on your anti-vax friends and family. 1. COVID-19 vaccines killed around 1 person for every 1,000 doses, for a total of 676,000 dead Americans. Bullshit. Steve misinterpreted unverified VAERS data. VAERS is a passive reporting system which accepts unverified reports that can't be used to establish causation. CDC has not detected any unusual or unexpected patterns for deaths following COVID vaccines that would indicate they are causing or contributing to deaths. 10 from Janssen, which was pulled from the market and which was not mRNA. That's all. 2. New Zealand and Czech data prove millions of vaccine deaths. Bullshit. The New Zealand claim relies on leaked partial data and flawed extrapolations. Official analyses show it doesn't demonstrate vaccine-caused deaths. 3. The Amish are all unvaccinated and have no autism or cancer. Therefore, vaccines cause these things. Bullshit. Amish communities do vaccinate, they do have autism, and the rate of autism is the same in vaccinated and unvaccinated children. The Amish don't have X trope is always false unless you're talking about cars and iPhones. 4. There were huge myocarditis and heart attack surges post-vaccination, specifically 559 times for myocarditis and 71 times for heart attacks. Bullshit. Inflated numbers from raw VAERS data. Surveillance and studies show post-mRNA myocarditis is very rare and typically mild, and cardiac risk is higher after COVID infection than vaccination. The group with the most recorded cases, males aged 16 to 17, had 106 per million doses. 5. Vaccines cause miscarriages and stillbirths, and they negatively affect fertility. Bullshit. Large cohorts and CDC monitoring show no increased miscarriage or stillbirth risk. Vaccination in pregnancy protects both the mother and baby from severe COVID. Prospective cohort studies show no increased risk of miscarriage or stillbirth from mRNA vaccines, and have actually showed reduced odds of pregnancy-terminating events such as stillbirth. 6. Day 1 hepatitis B vaccine is unnecessary and harmful, and no randomized controlled trials support its use. Bullshit. The birth dose Hep B vaccine prevents mother-to-child transmission and has reduced childhood cancer where implemented, such as Taiwan. It's a WHO-recommended evidence-based cancer prevention vaccine. Hep B vaccination at birth prevents vertical transmission and lifelong infection risks, since it can be transmitted prohibited from all sorts of activity, even as trivial as biting on the playground. Randomized controlled trials and cohort studies show it reduces chronic hepatitis by 90%, which can be very serious and lead to highly detrimental liver problems. Wasn't that fun? Steve's idiotic claims aren't too hard to debunk, are they? What else can we make fun of him about? Ooh, let's check out some of Steve's dumbest blog headlines from his Substack. How about this one? Sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender dysphoria are all primarily caused by vaccination. You heard it here first, folks. Vaccines make your kids gay and trans. A fate worse than death, as any conservative bigot will tell you. And it makes sense, because gay and trans people never existed before vaccines. Yep, they weren't just hiding for fear of being lynched. They didn't exist at all. Case closed. How about this one? A Navy plane crashed. Was it vaccines? Of course it was, Steve. The plane was in the air and evil pharma demons threw a handful of vaccines into the engine. It happens all the time. Check this out. A smart doctor lady accused me of killing people since I objectively have killed a shit ton of people with my lies, but she can't name their names. Not being able to list them by first and last name means they don't exist, you guys. Turbo cancer bullshit. Vaccine companies are actively trying to murder people. Another dumb fuck survey about vaccines and autism. Ooh, here's one that just says vaccines, turbo cancer, death. Any questions? I have one. What the fuck is turbo cancer? And since it's definitely not a real thing, why are you pretending it is? Reposts from some other jerk pretending that vaccines cause appendicitis. Fauci fear-mongering. A pretty girl died and it was because of the vaccine because I say so. It never ends. There's definitely a lot more we could mention, like that weird crap during the pandemic where he was offering huge sums of money to people on airplanes if they would take their mask off, but I feel like we've hit the key points. Of course, given recent events, it's worth wrapping up by mocking his pathetic debate me bro pageantry. For years, Steve was constantly whining about how nobody would debate him. No doctors, no scientists, not even college kids. He would offer kids $25,000 for convincing evidence regarding the safety of COVID vaccines. He even offered Barack Obama $1 million to engage him in debate regarding COVID misinformation. As though Obama gives two shits who Steve is, or is a medical expert that would engage in such a debate in the first place. But in general, Steve has repeatedly promised a lot of cash for anyone willing to debate him. So you'll be shocked to find out that Dan and I didn't get a dime from this rich asshole. Isn't that a bitch? It's okay. Publicly spanking Steve and Pierre like the petulant toddlers they are was payment enough for us. So that's it for Steve Kirsch, King Douche of the Anti-Vaxxers. Equal parts clueless and delusional, he's caused more harm to the public than his tiny pea brain is capable of comprehending. But I still think Pierre Kory is the worst fraud of the two, so stay tuned for his punishment coming soon. I'll see you next time.